Back in 2023, Larian Studios produced a sleeper hit that proved that turn-based traditional CRPGs are here to stay. Baldur's Gate 3 was lightning in a bottle, and its influence can be felt far and wide. But RPGs take a long time to make, and only now are we starting to see a surge of new titles looking to fill that void. Hell, we're seeing a whole lot of them, all at once. One of these games is Solasta II, the newest title from small Parisian studio Tactical Adventures that recently dropped into early access. I've spent quite a bit with the first Solasta game, and while the sequel takes on more than a little inspiration from one obvious source, it's unfair to just label this as budget Baldur's Gate. I've spent the last week or so bleeding every drop of adventure from the early access version to find out if this game is worth jumping into right now, or if it's better to hold off while the developers continue to cook.
What do you think they're doing here?
In the interest of disclosure, I did receive a review key for the game, but the thoughts and opinions within this video are my own. This game is pretty new and still in development, so I'm going to be keeping it as spoiler friendly as possible by blurring out or covering up anything that could be considered a big reveal. And as always, hitting subscribe, doing all the algorithm stuff down there helps us out way more than you know, and if you want to join our brave band of champions in supporting our quest, we'll talk about that more later on.
I like the cut of your jib.
Now it's time to strap on that plate mail, sharpen your swords, and summon your strongest magics. We're stepping back into the fantasy world of Solasta. Does the sequel have a shot at taking the Emperor's crown? Let's find out.
Take a look. Don't be shy.
My name is Boss Sauce.
And I'm Roland Coons. And together, we are the two-headed hero.
Solasta II is probably best described as a tactics game with exploration and role-playing elements. It's based on the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition SRD, the system reference document. Basically, that's the open source version of Dungeons & Dragons, white-label D&D with the serial numbers filed off, so to speak. The SRD contains all the mechanical nuts and bolts of the 5e system, other than the setting, so while many of the spells, stats, and skills might look familiar to D&D veterans, there's no Sword Coast or Forgotten Realms here. If you're familiar with the first Solasta, you probably found it to be one of the best translations of the SRD rule set to grace a screen, but this also means that it takes place within a completely original setting. Solasta II brings us back into that faraway fantasy world known by the same name, a land once ruled by the High Elves of the Manichaean Empire. A planet-shattering cataclysm warped the power of Arcana, transforming the land and its creatures, and opening up a rift that transported thousands of humans and their divine magic into the world of Solasta. A millennium of war and strife followed, but nowadays humans live alongside the other races of the realm in an uneasy alliance, and the power of the arcane has slowly returned. But in the wild frontier of Nyokos, something evil stirs once more. Something purple. A mythical figure arises, spreading chaos and nasty goo everywhere, and only one band of misfit grown-up foster children can stand against the rising tide of chaos. This is where Solasta II begins. Like the RPGs of old, Solasta II starts out with an in-depth character generator. You can choose to control just about every single facet of character building for each member of your orphan team, pick a few options from some templates if you want to speed things along, or just jump right into the action with a pre-made party. But if you're like me, half the fun is making your merry band of adventure clowns, and I'm not ashamed to say that I spent at least an hour or two dicking around in here. There's tons of potential just in the early version alone, and if Solasta I is any indication, the devs will be continuing to add more races and classes far beyond the final release. Rolling up a party member feels strikingly similar to a tabletop session in a D&D game. You're able to get pretty granular with all the options for character backgrounds and skill choices to pick from. There's even lists of languages and personality styles that influence many of the dialogue and story choices later on down the line. A great deal of cosmetics allow you to customize your murder hobo in just about any way you see fit. That said, I was a little disappointed with the lack of voice choices.
That might be so, but we still haven't worked out what we're supposed to be doing yet.
There's only 2 male and 2 female options, and it doesn't leave a lot to pick from for a 4-character party, even if the interesting personality mechanic and the sheer number of voice lines in the game goes a long way to compensate.
Your supervisor? Who's that?
It's established almost immediately that you're controlling a group of grown foster children, so early on you'll be asked to place each member of your adventure family into a family role, like golden child or scapegoat or so on. This further expands on how your characters interact with each other and the world at large. It's a pretty novel approach that I don't think I've ever seen before in any game, and if you start doing the math, this adds up to a staggering number of potential combinations and conflicts, and that means future replayability. However, even here we start to see some of the downsides of early access. It's really difficult to make a bad character here, just as it's nearly impossible to min-max or try out experimental builds. You're unable to make any characters with staggering weaknesses or superhuman abilities right off the bat. Early access also includes only 4 playable races: human, elf, halfling, and dwarf, so there's no horny tieflings or weird ogres that can join your little family outing. At least, not until Steam Workshop support is implemented. There's also only 6 classes to choose from: cleric, fighter, paladin, rogue, sorcerer, and wizard. No druid? No ranger? No barbarian? This means you're going to be stuck in a fairly tight net when it comes to party composition. My dreams of recreating the 4 halfling barbarians videos have been completely shattered. So I ended up going with 3 short kings and their human babysitter for my first run through, just to get a feel for how the different races play out. Yeah, they all look related, right? As the game opens, your ragtag foster family, the Caldwells, meet up on the road to your home village after years of wandering abroad. You find yourselves reunited under poor tidings. Your foster mother, Mahin Colwell, has recently passed away, and her funeral is to take place at the Temple of Mariake nearby. You split off from the main funeral procession with your cousin Landry, which begins a lengthy tutorial chapter. Right away, you'll notice that Solasta II makes huge improvements in the control scheme over the first game, whether you're running around as the party leader, a la Dragon Age, or using a more traditional point-and-click interface reminiscent of older CRPGs. The controller felt equally comfortable as the keyboard and mouse, and it's clear that this game was made to be as accommodating to consoles as it is to PCs. That also goes for the combat, a turn-based, grid-based tactical affair that any BG3 veteran will immediately jibe with. Attacks are all based around the fateful roll of a d20, with inspiration giving you another chance once per fight or so. Spellcasting follows the typical D&D slot-burning convention where your casters can only use them a certain number of times before needing a rest, but the game also keeps an eye to rules conventions that aren't always seen in your typical tabletop campaign, like needing spell components or special homebrew feats. The first Solasta game tended to feature at least a few environmental elements that could change the tide of a battle, which I thought was particularly awesome. I always felt a little bit clever when I was able to maneuver a kobold into being shoved off a cliff or killed them with a piece of falling masonry. While some of these are present in Solasta II, they don't come into play as much as I would have liked. High ground and cover do seem more important here, but I wish there were less toe-to-toe slugouts and more clever victories that utilize the terrain. I could only think of a couple instances where this actually mattered, like the pillar in the very first fight at the funeral. Combat itself is pretty awesome looking though. There's a ton of different attack and spell animations for every single type of weapon and magic out there, and it's pretty satisfying to watch your paladin crit striking a skeleton into bone meal. Battles can feel a bit slow moving at times, especially when you have to wait for several long animations in a row before you can act. And each skirmish can easily swell to 20 or more combatants, especially when multiple factions are involved. So you could say the pace is a bit more on the cerebral side, with some encounters taking me over 45 minutes to complete. This is compounded by the game's difficulty. It's surprisingly tough, even on the default level. My merry little band went down frequently, and the bad guys are smart enough to gang up on the casters or weakened characters in order to prevent a revival. I often found myself having to rely on cover tactics, ranged weaponry, and the clever use of magic items just to survive. These dice do not care if you live or die. But due to a deeply customizable difficulty system, dice rolls can be made more favorable, and damage numbers can be upped or reduced depending on how narrative or tactical you want the experience to feel. A wealth of accessibility options ensures that newcomers will be able to enjoy themselves, while D&D veterans will have some tough battles to chew on. As you vanquish countless skeletons and cultists, and wow, there's a lot of skeletons, your group of orphans will eventually level up. During the downtime, you'll be able to improve your characters in a similar fashion to traditional D&D. Your dauntless heroes can multi-class if they've got the right stats, and there's a decent amount of wiggle room to dig yourself out of if you feel like you've ruined your build. Many of the class feats and features seem different from other D&D licensed games due to the homebrew nature of Solasta's setting. This is a much more magic-focused setting. Even your fighters and rogues can easily dip into magic, and clerics will even be able to eyeball a few spells from the mage list, and vice versa. You never know when a rogue might need a cantrip once in a while, and I felt like taking a dip into the mage features was really handy for my frontline fighter. But once again, even more of these are incomplete and can't be fully evaluated since early access caps your character levels at 4. Despite this, what's already here can take some interesting directions or have unexpected repercussions. For example, the Starchild feat does damage to your first spellcasting target, which really makes Charm a whole lot less useful. Outside of combat, exploring the environments feels much more contained, like points of interest on a D&D campaign map rather than being a single interconnected world. After the opening hours, I was setting myself up for disappointment, thinking that this would be just a bunch of linear maps stapled together like an old-school tactics game from the PS1. But all of this changed the moment I saw the overworld map. This massive hex grid chock full of curiosities and encounters changed my tune immediately. The promise of a huge continent to explore is rife with possibilities and has plenty of room for expansion. Random events and time-sensitive encounters pop up all over the place, and even within these little mini-adventures, there's plenty of hidden treasures and secrets to find, provided that your characters can pass the appropriate skill checks blocking the way. Some of these even match the same quality as the main quest, like the massive sulfur caverns, while others are just simple text-based skill checks that would feel right at home in a cozy tabletop campaign. It's important to note that travel and rest are all beholden to a day and night cycle. Rest consumes rations as a resource. Between battles, you can short rest to heal up a limited number of times, and you can long rest at a campfire to regain your spell slots and health, if you have some food in your pack. One really nice quality of life feature is the ability to swap weapon proficiencies during any long rest. So if you find that shiny new magic battle axe, you can be sure that somebody in your party is going to be able to use it. But time still ticks away during rest and travel, so you're often faced with the choice to travel farther and risk exhaustion, or play it safe and rest to restore your travel points while using up some of your valuable resources in the field. Unlike Dragon Age or Baldur's Gate 3, the maps in Solasta II are much smaller. There's far less verticality and a more condensed scope. Athletic feats like climbing up cliff sides, jumping over gaps, and swimming through the occasional watery cave are all done with a button prompt, but it seemed a little weird that even your clumsiest and weakest battle orphans could do all of this without any sort of skill check. Traps are detected automatically, trap disarms and lockpicking are done with a simple dice roll, and pickpocketing is sadly nowhere to be found, which takes a lot of fun out of sending your rogue on sneaking missions. Stealth is represented by a detection circle that shrinks and grows depending on each character's abilities and armor. Any poor idiot standing in the circle pops a detection timer before they can see you and act, which gives you plenty of time to split the party and set up an ambush. As in any proper RPG, there's still the ever-present dungeon loot bags and random crates full of exotic wares kicking around for you to grab without any repercussions. To the game's credit, you won't be spending as much time picking up a bunch of apples or kitchenware or kicking barrels around as you would in a Baldur's Gate 3 or Skyrim kind of situation. But the lack of a crime mechanic is going to be a little disappointing for would-be thieves. Loot can be shuffled around easily with this good old-fashioned grid inventory screen. I appreciated how you could send each piece of loot right to whichever character you wish as you pick it up, and overall inventory management is a lot more manageable than many other games in the CRPG realm. Too bad that the loot itself seems a bit trivial in early access. You'll find the odd scrolls and +1 weapons and health potions, but the vast majority of treasures is going to be crafting materials.
You just get used to it, I suppose.
It's clear this was designed to be expanded on in further releases, but as it stands right now, you'll only need the odd component here and there to cast a few of the more powerful spells. Magic items need to be identified before they can be used, and an attunement system is in the works where you'll need to tune into the abilities of an artifact during a long rest before the magic within it becomes usable. More interesting holdovers from tabletop that should add another layer of strategy, if and when they're finished.
We need to trust each other.
This also goes for other features that are in the works, like the faction system and the Combers, a group of scavengers for hire that can sell off anything you leave behind in all the dark dungeons that you clear out. The problem is, it's hard to review what's not there. Much of this game seems like a shell of its aspirations so far. But more often than not, a CRPG lives and dies by how it weaves its tale.
There's pages and pages of this horrific stuff. Do you really want the whole story?
Solasta II does much to innovate with its group conversation system. By taking each character's personality traits, family traits, known languages, and skills into account, the bog-standard dialogue trees we've seen time and again can be transformed in a number of different ways. Language features even carry over into the notes and books you'll find strewn around the realm, which can only be translated by characters that know the right language. Certain encounters can change completely if the enemies can understand you as well. It's possible to join forces with an Etin to stamp out a horde of undead, or even recruit this badass little kobold to fight at your side. All of this feels very ambitious and complex, but once again it falls a bit flat in its implementation. NPC conversations themselves feel limited and gated off. It's not usually possible to return to someone to gather more lore and info if you're confused about a task, and returning characters only offer up a few choice lines before reverting to repeated dialogue. But is the story itself any good? Well, the game's pretty new, so like I mentioned before, I'm going to do my best to keep this spoiler friendly. But if you want to go into Solasta II completely blind, go ahead and skip over to the next chapter.
Give me a moment. I'll join you there.
As the sun rises on Solasta, your group of 4 misfit adventurers are summoned back to their home village after many years abroad, having recently received word that their adoptive mother, Mahin Colwell, has passed away. After a lengthy tutorial featuring the comedy stylings of your stepbrother Landry,
The one and only. It's been a long time.
and running into your mourning stepsister Diorcus,
Hiya, Dee.
Is this a party or a funeral?
you arrive at the rundown temple where the funeral service is about to take place. Your other stepbrother, Ricard, pries himself away from his bottle just long enough to conduct the service. But as he begins, Diorcus falls into a fit of rage and attempts to use some sort of purpleberry arcane powers to try and bring your mom back to life. You stop the ritual with a well-placed piece of masonry, which really pisses off the goddess Mariake. She brands Diorcus as an oathbreaker in a pretty awesome cutscene that turns this funeral into a rock quarry before your very eyes. But the damage is already done. Landry lies dead, and Ricard is mortally wounded. In a desperate bid to save your remaining stepbrother, you bargain with Mariake to take on a mysterious covenant that your dead mother had left unfulfilled, thereby saving his life. Next thing you know, you're marked with the brand of Mariake and isekai'd off to a faraway land, Nyokos, with barely a coin to your name and no idea what to do next. Ricard lives, but he needs help, probably to shake off the delirium tremens.
Mariake's breath. Little spiders all over me. Kill him quick!
What? Those little critters?
Ah! You know I can't stand them.
And when you attempt to find medical assistance, you end up getting captured by suspicious elves and tossed into a dungeon.
If you're telling the truth, then nothing bad will happen. Death to the beacon!
After a comfy night's sleep in this rat-infested cage, you're guided through a breathtaking palace of marble and gold to meet face to face with Lady Anabasia, ruler of Kaer Mar, who comes off as a terrifying dictator. She saved Ricard only to keep him as an honored guest. You know, a hostage, while you become her unpaid gophers. So now it's up to you to figure out what the hell the Covenant even is,
Indeed. We actually don't know where we are right now.
while trying to work off your life debt to Lady Anabasia.
My appetite for information can be voracious.
A chance meeting at a murder scene brings you together with Jebfa, a halfling wizard of the nomadic Kaum tribe who asks you for an escort. The Kaum elders think the mysterious covenant and your stepsister's newfound powers might have something to do with an ancient grape-flavored witch named Shadwyn, who prominently appears in all of the game's trailers.
There will be blood.
Returning to Ricard with these clues, you can see smoke off in the distance. The gateway to Kaer Mar is under assault by the forces of a mysterious mage that can't stop spewing sticky purple ropes everywhere. Could this be Shadwyn? Yes, it is. But is that your stepsister over there too? So that's the setup. Diorcus as the conflicted mid-boss, Shadwyn as the ultimate enemy, and a whole continent to save from purple goo in the name of peace and harmony.
It doesn't sound like we have a lot of choice.
You're right.
Obviously, I'm leaving quite a bit out, but I can't help feel that the pacing is off here. Too much happens in such a short amount of time to make sense of it all, and a lot of the quests you get sent on don't really have clear motivations. It seems pretty obvious who the big bad is, but there's a disconnect in what you're doing in the moment to moment versus what you probably should be doing to stop them, and a lot of backtracking pops up when it seems like you should be pressing forward. Maybe all of this clears up as the final reveals take place, because right now only a fragment of Act 1 can be played through before you get knocked back to the main menu as if this was a $30 demo. Solasta II does make up for some of its story stumblings with beautiful environments. A wide range of lush jungles, sunny beaches, and worn-down castle ruins filled with burning candles and ancient statues of deities are all waiting out there for you to admire.
You weren't joking.
Kaer Mar's palace is amazing. Gold, marble, and transparent floors that show the forests below. And some of the cutscenes were truly awesome. Put me right in the mood to swing some swords around in a vast fantasy frontier. A good amount of attention was paid to the characters as well, even though this is where the budget shortcomings begin to show through a bit. Faces look pretty good, showing real depth of expression, however the hair looks static and weird on a lot of the characters. Then we have occasional issues with the dynamic conversation camera, which sometimes just swings into the scenery. Oh yes, Solasta, I really wanted to see this bag or this tent wall way up close, rather than the characters talking to each other. Well done. Speaking of conversations though, the voice acting is quite good.
You wouldn't believe us if we told you.
Huh. Perhaps not.
Especially if you like a few layers of fantasy cheese on top. Guard performances and minor characters are the main offenders when it comes to ham acting, but I liked it all the same.
You're next, rebel scum!
Unfortunately, some of the lip syncing comes across as a bit wobbly and weird.
Rahak Garabak!
No doubt a side effect of that smaller budget popping up once again. But still, this pirate lady, Lyra, was an absolute gem.
Oh, tain't nothing. I mean, we was spliced, but ne'er tied the knot, if and you get my drift.
Oh.
Lyra, did you know that we have a Patreon? And you can join it for as little as $1 a month?
Well, I'll be blowed.
That's right, there's special Discord roles and exclusive content. You can even see our scripts and notes in there.
I like the cut of your jib.
Lyra, give it to me straight. Did you subscribe to the channel and like the video?
Well, for my sins.
That's what I thought. Well, you better go ahead and do it right now.
Belay that and pay the piper.
Sound and music is also pretty quality stuff. A decent crossroad between something like Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings. I especially enjoyed the chill song in the Kaum encampment. It does a lot to bring the fantasy vibes to life.
What?
Shh. Listen, my friend.
During battle, the sword slashes and spell impacts sounded exciting and forceful, and the heroes jump in with silly one-liners from time to time, taunting each other when they crit fail in a fight,
Another miss!
or complaining about getting their clothes dirty when they gotta crawl through a tunnel.
Who's gonna clean my clothes after this?
I love these little touches, and it always feels like it adds some grounding to a game.
Oh, blessed listener.
Well, I thought it was my stomach growling.
Still, this early access build has its share of shortcomings. The usual UE5 stuff is going on here, which will bury the frame rate in a shallow unmarked grave from time to time. I've hit loading screen hangs and several features that just don't work, a tune for example. And there's no shortage of early access feel. What's more disappointing is what's missing, really. Yes, this is early access, but for the price on offer, I was hoping to play a fully functional slice of the game. As it stands, the character building feels a bit light, the crafting system is nowhere to be found, factions don't matter, many of the multi-part side quests can't even be finished, and there's only a fraction of Act 1 available to play. There's also one really frustrating battle that you're actually supposed to lose, which very much feels like a dungeon master introducing his own super cool OC to save you, and that's a move that's generally seen as quite cringy in the tabletop world. After I scoured the entire map more than once, bleeding it for every random encounter and possible side quest that I could, I came away with only about 18 hours of playtime as of writing this. Solasta II is filled with books that have covers but nothing inside, which kinda seems like a bit of a metaphor right now. So can Solasta II fill the giant stompy mailed boots that Baldur's Gate 3 left behind? Well, only time will tell. There's definitely a few things that set Solasta apart. Overworld exploration mechanics, the unique conversation system, and the inventory management, just to name a few. But the uneven pacing of the storyline and the lack of immersive elements beyond a surface level might send players right back to the Sword Coast instead. If you're looking for a straight-up good tactics RPG with some light role-playing elements and overworld management, Solasta II will probably hold you over once it's finished. The developers claim the final game will have a level cap raised to 10, co-op multiplayer, more character options, and even more quests and encounters. I mean, that all sounds great, but it's impossible to review what isn't there, especially since this game's already for sale. I find myself reminded of Baldur's Gate 3 once again.
Well, I'll be blowed.
Specifically the long, multi-year early access cycle that took place before it launched into a final release. Everything about Solasta II's design feels more like a role-playing system rather than a standalone game. That can be exciting and worthwhile, especially if you're looking to get your hands on the workshop tools to make dungeon encounters for your buddies. But unless something absolutely stunning happens over the coming year plus of the development cycle, I think Solasta II will sit just fine as a budget-level surrogate for Baldur's Gate fans that want something a little different, provided that it gets finished in a timely fashion. So what do you think? Do you have a favorite RPG that came out in this recent wave of wonderful CRPGs for the PC? Let us know down in the comments below. Big shout out to all the brave champions that keep the fire burning in the Heroes Tavern. Wolfgang Bristol, Yaroslav Rybaki, Adam Uselman, Amelie McNamara, James Blake, Jim DiFrancesco, Vulpes, Cameron Frement, Dominic Nguyen, John Williams, Mahogany God King, Vinny 2142, Muggs McGurk 812, Amajuda Packmaker, and the rest. If you're still here, thank you all so much for the support. Anything you decide to donate helps us out much more than you know, but if your wallet happens to be stuck in a wad of sticky purple goo, you can always help us out by hitting all the buttons down there, mashing a comment into that little text box, and shaking that algorithm like a kobold on a rope bridge. Thank you all for watching. And thanks for 10,000 subs. We'll see you on the next Two-Headed Hero.
Now, just walk away and pretend you're angry. We'll mention your help in our report.